fading out the music. Now you have to listen to me. Good morning, I say. I know for most of you it's good afternoon. My name is Daniela Jauk-Ajami. I am so honored that I may guide you through this important 3-hour event today. For me, it's morning. I'm tuning in from Ohio, United States. You will notice I have an accent. I'm originally an Austrian, but I am an assistant professor for sociology here at the University of Akron, Ohio. I'm also a US citizen. I did not vote for that. And I invite you to share in the chat where you are coming in from. We will be using the chat. So you can ask questions and comments throughout the entire event. Try it out right now. From Switzerland, from Germany, UK, you're wonderful. Carinthia, I love to see. All over Europe, that's wonderful because we are coming together to spread STOP, like a wonderful virus of love and anti-violence. We will be spending the next 3 hours together, and this is the final event of a European Union SURF-funded program. Stop Community Matters, empowering communities to come together to end domestic violence. Thank you. I love to see the little chat messages coming in. We are really excited. The STOP concept was developed by Professor Dr. Sabine Stövesand, the mother goddess of STOP in Germany and elsewhere in the world. And she is in the room. We will hear from her substantially today. STOP has been implemented in numerous cities in Germany since 2010, since 2019, also in numerous communities in Austria. And we are celebrating today a European Union project that brings STOP into France, Belgium, Romania, and the Czech Republic, and hopefully way beyond these countries, because a digital toolkit is being launched that could theoretically be used all over the world. The STOP project team has the long-term goal of replicating the STOP model across the planet, because domestic violence, interpersonal partner violence affects all of us, and the roots are deeply ingrained in social structures and norms. And it is a sad fact that the unsafest place for women and girls all around the globe is their own home. Yet it's often seen as a private matter, which it is not. And it is a structural matter, it's a social matter, and that's where STOP comes in to prevent domestic violence on a community level and on a community organized level. Let me share my screen again, just some housekeeping. This is probably the most you hear from me today. I will be in the background introducing the speakers, and I will be taking your question. This is also, let's just be frank, a feminist event. And as feminists, we make invisible work visible. Behind the scenes, Dore Mirza and Ola Hamadi have worked very lovingly to put this event together and to prepare all of us. So big shout out to Ola and Dore, whose names you will also see in the chat, who are supporting this event and who are so amazing in the background. So a couple housekeeping things. The event, as you can see, is being recorded. I always love recorded events. Most of them we then never watch, or me. However, only the speakers are recorded. You are not recorded. Keep your while we respect your privacy, it would be totally nice if you could keep your camera on. STOP is all about connecting with each other, and it's easier for you to connect and for all the speakers and project partners to connect if we can see you. Please keep your mic on mute. All of you have done that already brilliantly, but we also take the liberty to mute you just to give everyone their space. You can leave questions in the chat at any time. And to give you you heard a little bit of music in the beginning. So some stop partners have actually put together a playlist for you. I've put that on Spotify and also on Apple Music. We'll post the links in the chat, but also they are open playlists because stop is an open concept. Please contribute. If you have a favorite female empowerment song or a favorite anti-violence song, I'd love to see it in the chat and we can add it as we go. And you may hear it today. To give you a little bit of a rough sketch, the detailed program is certainly being posted in the chat, the link to it. We will spend the next 3 hours together. And to kick us off, now I give the word to Alicia Schwinton, who will give us an introduction to the European Union project. Alicia Schwinton is in fact the coordinator of this EU project, Community Matters, community-based model to stop domestic violence, and she is also the director of the Network Association of Austrian Autonomous Women's Shelters. Please, Alicia, take the floor.
Thank you, Daniela. Dear guests of the conference, dear partners, dear colleagues. Today's conference is a result of the 2 years of hard work within this project, Community Matters, community-based model to stop domestic violence. This project, as also Daniela already mentioned, was awarded within the Daphne project call of the Citizenship, Equality, Rights and Values program of the European Union. And this program in the last years have been actually something what was giving the civil society and the NGOs different platforms to bring to fight violence against women, to bring very innovative work and sharing of practices and knowledge on the European level. It's something where we got a lot of empowerment. And also this project Stop Neighborhoods Without Partner Violence, in German Stop Stadtteile ohne Partnergewalt, was implemented exactly in frame of this call. That's exactly the community-based model that we have brought to life. STOP is a social space-oriented violence prevention project. It involves neighborhoods in the prevention of domestic violence in their own communities. The STOP concept was initiated and brought to life by Dr. Sabine Stuyvesant, professor at the Hamburg University of Applied Sciences, Department of Social Work at the Faculty of Economics and Social Affairs. And the first STOP project in Germany started in 2010. And in Austria, it was introduced in 2019. Very, very quickly, it grew to an example of a success project. And currently, we are at almost 40 projects in Austria where we implement STOP. So that's a big success, and that's why it has been also decided that we will start a new project in order to, within this 2-year-long journey, to adapt and replicate this innovative approach of STOP from the German-speaking countries to other European countries, and these are Belgium, Czech Republic, France, and Romania. And at this point, I would like to just introduce the organizations that are part of this consortium and the partners who have collaborated on this project. And from Hamburg University of Applied Sciences, Department of Social Work, Germany, this was Dr. Sabine Stuyvesant, Rosa Brackner, and Judith Spendler. From the same organization, Center for Design Research, Germany, Anke Hamann, and Linda Rames. From Association for Liberty, Equality of Gender ALEC in Romania, Camelia Proca, Eniko Gal, and Alexandra Abodean. From Belgium, the organization Garance ASBL, Irene Zeilinger. From France, the organization Escepsito, Mathilde Synagolge. From Rosa Centrum Progeny from the Czech Republic, Branislava Maranova-Vargova and Martina Chronova. From the organization that organized today's event, the European Network for the Work with Perpetrators of Domestic Violence, Dimitra Mintsidis, Ola Hamadi, and Dore Mielca. And at the end, but not last, our amazing advisory board, Carol Hagemann-White, and Simon Güntner, who is today not with us. And my colleagues from the Austrian Autonomous Women's Shelters, the project coordinator Martina Knoll, and Christina Kopf, the coordinator of all the STOP projects in Austria. Thank you so much for your work. The purpose of this European STOP project was to develop STOP Toolbox, which is available online and will be revealed to you later during this conference, but also to create a curriculum of STOP for international use and upscale in the European Union, starting with Belgium, Czech Republic, France, and Romania, as we already said. This has happened through comprehensive training sessions, which we have started in October 2023 in Hamburg, Germany. Then in April 2024, we were on a week-long amazing trip to Sibiu that was very, very intense and very full of work. And finally, the first European STOP training was finalized and concluded in September 2024 in Prague. In between of the training sessions, trainees have prepared the groundwork and trained local stakeholders for future replication of the STOP program in their home countries. I will share now my screen for a very brief moment and show you just a few photos from our project. Good, this is a start of our project, and I want to just explain you what the meaning of this photo. This photo was taken in Vienna during our kickoff meeting, which took place in Margareten. This is a district of Vienna, the 5th district of Vienna, where the project, the first pilot project in Austria started. So the project, the European project, starts where also the first pilot project of this success story in Austria starts, and hopefully will repeat itself on the European level. The next photo is very important photo for me, because here we are in Hamburg during our partner meeting, where the social design of the toolbox starts, and our colleagues from the social design on the University of Hamburg have created a whole room that we were walking through in order to create the toolbox that will be created, that will be presented today. So we have actually walked through it before it was created as an online space. This is a photo from an amazing place in Romania where we had a very intensive training, one of the most intense trainings with the community organizing, and that was a very beautiful memory of it. Also very beautiful weather in April. And finally, the last two photos, this is from one of our partner meetings, and here, very important, probably the most important, the first finished group of trainees at the European level who have completed the STOP training. And yeah, in about 10 days, the project Community Matters will officially conclude, will finish. And of course, we now have the time for reflection. We have the time for this conference to show you also what we have done in the last 2 years. And we can also reflect on the difficulties and successes we had, on the achievements, but also on the future work that is still necessary for the long-term solutions to the very actual problem of violence against women and domestic violence, and also the backlash in the national, European, and worldwide politics we are currently facing. And whoever opened the news today in the morning knows what I'm talking about. But stop, this model tells us also that every person can do something and can say something. Although today we will more talk than do, for tomorrow we can put these words and these learnings into practice. So I wish you a very, very exciting time today. And I thank you so much for the participation and invite you to become part of STOP.
Thank you, Alicia, for this amazing and powerful kickoff. I love to see the photographs. That's exactly what we need, right? The smiling faces, the empowerment. We have to encourage each other, stop the backlash as well in the long term. For institutional greetings, we now give the floor to Kalina Levanyeska. She works in the Gender Equality Unit in the European Commission's Directorate for Justice and Consumers, and she deals and oversees projects and funding in the area of gender equality. Please, Kalina, take the floor.
Yes, hello everyone. Thank you for inviting me to this event to give this institutional welcome, but a bit more as well because I wanted to present what are the specific links that are between our policy making and the STOP project. That we are very happy to see that was successful and that the STOP model was further transferred to new European countries. So we happy to see that this truly European project is ending very well. I would like to speak about how we see the contribution of the STOP project to our EU policy efforts in preventing and combating domestic violence. In the Istanbul Convention, to which the EU has acceded in 2023, as you probably know, as of 1st of October 2023, the EU has become a party to the Istanbul Convention on violence against women and domestic violence. In that convention, we have a specific mention of persons who witness acts of violence. So it's in Article 27, reporting, where such persons, such witnesses are encouraged to report the acts of violence or suspected acts of violence to the competent organization or authorities. And this specific article is there to say that the role of persons such as friends, neighbors, family members, colleagues or teachers and other community members is important, that they can have a role in breaking the silence that is quite often around domestic violence. Also in our EU directive on combating violence against women and domestic violence, which was adopted quite recently, so it dates back to May 2024, we have mentions of third parties interventions. So these third parties who are called to report or to intercept behaviors that are harmful, so harmful to the child, but Also, but these third parties, if they suspect that persons are victims of domestic violence or sexual violence, they are encouraged to report such an offense to the competent authorities within their own initiative. And so this support is reflected in our EU financial support that we propose under the SURF program. So in particular, under the Daphne call, so the Daphne call on preventing and combating gender-based violence and violence against children. So in the 2020 Daphne call, from which this project is funded, we had a specific mention of witnesses and bystanders in that call. So this was in relation to one of the results expected from the call. So changed attitudes and behaviors concerning gender-based violence. So now I want to say a couple of words about future, because I think it is also relevant, because our policy efforts, but as well the work on the ground, so the work that is done by projects that is supporting us in our policies is not, it should not stop. And so I wanted to shortly mention that soon we will have a new call for proposals under the Daphne stream of the SURF program, and in which we will have 4 priorities. So we will have large-scale actions. We'll have a priority related to the victims' support and protection, and we will have a priority on the prevention of gender-based violence, and finally also we will have the specific priority for on children. So actions in making integrated child protection system work in practice. And this call is a bit delayed, so the preparation is taking a bit more time, as we want to better, or the best way possible, reflect the provisions of the new directive there in the call. So the call, it will be a useful instrument to support the implementation of the new directive. And in this call, we also kept this mention of witnesses and bystanders in relation to specific, in particular relation to domestic violence. And finally, because we are speaking about future, I wanted to use this opportunity to mention our expected future policy developments that are related to the political guidelines of the new Commission, and especially of the new Commissioner, Ms. Labib. So soon we will present, so it's for March this year, we will present the roadmap for women's rights. And this will be a very high-level document that will outline the key gender equality policy principles for the coming years. And later this year, we will issue an open public consultation, so in spring this year probably as well. And it will be a start of a process to design a new gender equality strategy for post-2025. As you know, our current gender equality strategy will end this year. And in these political guidelines of the Commission, we already have a commitment that the gender equality strategy will be renewed. And in particular, we already have the mention of combating and preventing gender-based violence. There is a mention of economic empowerment, participation of women in politics, discrimination in health, education, housing, and social protection in supply of goods and services, and this taking into account the current challenges in labor market, as well as there is a strong accent on online violence and work-life balance. Yes, so to end, I would like to encourage you to, if you're not very familiar, to find more information about the SERV program. So I provided some useful links here. So if you need help, you can contact one of our SERV national contact points, and watch out for the EU funding and tenders portal for the upcoming publication of our Daphne call, but also other SERV calls. Thank you very much. And I wanted to close my intervention by wishing all of you a very successful event this afternoon.
Thank you so much, Kalina from the European Commission. I've seen that many people have entered the room since we started, and we have already 100 people in the room almost to end violence in our communities. Let me quickly throw up the plan for today again so we can orient ourselves. STOP is very much a model that combines theory and practice. And that's also how this event is designed. So after the welcome and introductions, you will get a little theoretical input in a keynote and a project overview, but already in this part have the opportunity to mingle with the project partners in informal chat rooms for 15 minutes. We then take a little break, and then we really go into the launch of the Stop Toolbox that provides practical steps for you. And we have a panel discussion with the project partners, how they took first steps in these new partner countries. And of course, at the end, there will be a plenary session for you for your questions and answers. Some of the questions we have received, but again, you can chat. You can use the chat box at any point to give your comments, your questions, and I'll try to address them. I now have the tremendous honor to give the word to the founding mother of STOP, Dr. Sabine Stuyvesant, who created the STOP model in Germany, successfully implemented it in Germany and also spread to Austria, as you have heard, but also engages in international collaboration around it and is in touch with US community organizers. That I learned at a webinar that is wonderful and posted on the STOP website if you want to go back and more in depth. Sabine Stuyvesant is professor for social work at the University of Applied Sciences in Hamburg, faculty for business and social sciences in the Department of Social Work. Her scholarly work focuses on social work theory, ethics of social work, group work and community work, and gender and diversity, not surprisingly, but she is also a prolific practitioner of social work and a community organizer. So since almost a decade, she's executive director of GWA St. Pauli, a neighborhood center for social and cultural work in Hamburg. Also involved since 5 years with the shelter for battered women, Frauen helfen Frauen. She was very deservedly honored with the Order of Merit of the Federal Republic of Germany in 2024 by the President of Germany. And her foundational work on the STOP model is this combination of theory and practice that is an ongoing circle from practice to research, then back to practice, improved practice, new research. And so she betters the world. And on top of her busy schedule, she also loves to sing. And it is Dr. Sabine Stuyvesant who will now introduce our keynote speaker, Laurie Michaud.
Thank you so much, Dani. I'm very honored to be here, and I back, Dani, please let me introduce Laurie, because Laurie is one of my absolute heroes. And community work is all around the world, and I did not invent it, although I started in the early 90s. I'm a bit older than Laurie. But I met Laurie through a mutual friend, Amy Thompson, another pioneering woman for community work. And she's also here. I saw you, Amy. And there are more of us, Mimi from LA and Christy from New Zealand. And we have been in touch for quite a while. And good things don't happen only with one person. It's always a collective thing. And so Laurie, she is an activist, and she is committed to preventing violence against women, and she is a co-founder of Raising Voices. I love Raising Voices. It's such a beautiful project and so successful. It's a feminist non-profit organization in Kampala, Uganda. And Laurie has over 25 years of leadership and management experience, including co-directing Raising Voices for 23 years. And she is still on the board of directors. And she is an innovator, and she founded several organizations: the Jijinga Women's Center for Sexual Health in Tanzania, the Center for Domestic Violence in Southern Africa, and the Global Community for Understanding Scale Processes. And I guess there are many more. I don't know how many lives you have, Laurie, but you did a lot, and you developed also the SASA approach. That's really wonderful community work, and you will talk about that more. We can learn firsthand from you. And this has been used in over, I cannot believe it, 60 countries. People, you listen to me, we are talking about 6 European countries. We only have it in 2. But Laurie and Sasa succeeded in 60 different countries in the global south. And so there's a lot going on. And so you have extensive experience in community mobilization and in mentoring. And you have a master's degree in human rights from Makerere University, and you are currently based in Boston. So very, very welcome, Laurie. I'm really happy that we can have you here.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here, and it's so fun to be with a whole group of new people. This is not my usual community, so it's very fun to be involved in this event, and I really appreciate the invite. So thank you so much. I've been asked to share a little bit about SASA and the approach that we use, also that centers communities. So I shall share my screen and just get started. So we're going to be talking today, just as you've heard from the initial startup, really the power of communities and how much communities can do and are doing to prevent violence against women. So just a little bit of background. Sabina mentioned the work that we've been doing. It's true. We really strongly believe that community mobilization can prevent and does prevent violence against women. And we not only sort of feel it, but we also have some evidence behind that. From our work, we did conduct a randomized control trial that did demonstrate a reduction of risk in intimate partner violence against women by 52% in communities in Uganda where SASA was being used, which is a very, very great number, and was actually the first trial in sub-Saharan Africa to assess community level impact. So a lot of the studies that have been done and are currently still being done really just talk to the folks who are involved in the project. And actually the SASA study really tried to see, can we change the social norms across the community, not just with community members who are directly involved, and that's where we got the 52% reduction. So it is really important and possible to change the social norms in a community itself. And what we've been doing along the way is really documenting our approaches. And so we did publish SASA, we did an adaptation of SASA, which I'll talk a little bit more about, called SASA Faith for religious communities and faith-based communities, and then SASA Together, which is the latest iteration. And all of the methodologies have been used, adapted, scaled in various ways across the world, primarily in the global south, across 65 countries at this point, which is really encouraging. And it means that even when contexts are very different, there are so many similarities in the work that we do on community mobilization that lessons and approaches and ideas are really shareable and usable across different contexts. And so what that means is millions and millions of people, men and women and young people, are preventing violence in their own communities around the world, which is incredibly exciting. And, STOP is a big part of that as well. So just to say where it began, so this is Jijenge Women's Center for Sexual Health. This was in 1995, so it is quite a long time ago, Sabina. We started there. I was very fortunate to be part of a team that created the first Center for Sexual Health for and by women in Mwanza, Tanzania. It was actually the first in all of Tanzania, services for women by women. And we really started thinking, okay, we'll provide services. That's what really women need. HIV rates were high at that point in Tanzania. Women had very little access to reproductive health and contraceptives and HIV testing. And so this is why we created Jijenge. And so at Jijenge, we thought, okay, services are what women need. Which is true. They really did need services, but actually what we found is women would come and we would talk about contraceptive, we'd talk about HIV testing, and women would say, yeah, they would sit politely. And really, they couldn't really do much because of the violence in their relationship. So they didn't have power to actually use the contraceptives or protect themselves against HIV. And so we said, okay, we have to start working on violence. So let's provide services for violence against women. Once we did that, our waiting room was full, standing room only, every single day. And we thought, well, this is completely unsustainable. What can we do? And so while we thought services was the answer, women were saying, it's important and we need it, but that's not good. I'm going to keep coming. And so again and again, day after day, we had more women for services than we could manage. And so that's when we really started thinking about, how do we stop this? How do we do prevention? How do we stop the violence from happening? So that's where we started working on violence against women prevention. We learned a lot. We made a lot of mistakes, and we learned. And so one of the learnings was, services are essential, but prevention is too. We can't just focus on services. We also learned that using the language of women's rights was very overwhelming. So we would do activities in the community around violence in our early days of prevention and talk about women's rights very broadly. Women have a right to work. Women have a right to use contraceptives. They have a right not to be beaten. All this, and it was very overwhelming for women, and they felt too scared to engage in the work because it was very overwhelming and too sort of in your face. So we learned that the language of rights really didn't work very well for our communities. We also learned that one-off activities just don't work. So we would do a drama one day, we'd do a radio program here, and we do all sorts of activities. And we were so busy doing these activities, but actually they weren't building toward anything. They were very disconnected from each other. So that was a learning that we found we really have to do something different than that. We also ran activities as staff. So staff members would go into communities and do activities and discussions rather than community members leading. Another lesson learned. And we also learned that raising awareness, just talking about violence, that it exists, or saying end violence, like it doesn't really help people. It wasn't taking into account where people were and helping facilitate a process of change with them and for their communities. And so we learned a lot at Jijenge and what to do and what not to do. And so then we decided to found Raising Voices, really to focus on prevention. How do you do this? At this time, it was the late 90s, and there weren't really program approaches out there. There wasn't very much either theory or practice on how to do violence prevention. And so that's why we founded Raising Voices, to really focus on how do we prevent violence against women. And that was our sole focus and passion. So what we did is very, very slowly start with community members. We worked with community members, and this is a few of some of my favorites and from the very early days. Some have passed and some are just now still activists today. But they were folks from all over. Hillary, who sold furniture on the street, to police officers, to butchers, to just regular women and men. And we started talking and building relationships and being in communities and really trying to hear and understand from community members how they felt about violence against women, how it was impacting their lives, and what they wanted to do about it. So we really, really focused and centered community members in this work rather than focusing staff. So this led to a whole documentation and evolution of ideas. So the first piece we published was Mobilizing Communities to Prevent Domestic Violence. That was the very early days. And what it did is try to say, okay, if we're going to prevent violence, let's do it in a systematic way and provide ideas and activities and materials for community members along a structured process of change. It was successful in many ways, and in other ways we learned a lot. Through that learning, we developed SASA. So what wasn't working, we developed SASA. SASA means now in Kiswahili, and it's also an acronym for the approach of START, awareness, support, and action. And I'll talk a little bit more about SASA in detail. As we did SASA, we also then realized that we were getting a lot of demand from faith-based communities to really focus on how to leverage the power of faith-based communities and religion through our work. And so we did an adaptation of SASA for faith-based communities and published SASA Faith. And then all that learning a decade or so later, we put into SASA Together. That there were many things in SASA that weren't working, and we then further adapted and published into SASA Together. So you can see community organizing is an incredibly iterative process and requires a lot of change, a lot of pivoting, a lot of learning along the way. So I'm going to share just a short video. It's just a few minutes, but because it's a comprehensive approach and it's a little bit difficult to necessarily get a sense of, in just the few minutes that I have, I'm going to share this little video that hopefully will give you a sense of the approach. I hope you can. Is that okay, everybody? Yeah.
In this part of the world, most especially here in Uganda, women and men are valued differently. Society has heaped privileges on the men, while the women are looked at as subordinate. SASA is a community mobilization approach to prevent violence against women and HIV and AIDS. When a woman is experiencing violence, especially from her partner, she's really unable to keep safe from HIV. Men have power to decide how, when, and where sex should be done. And the woman is at risk of being infected because she cannot say no, or she cannot stop the man's adulterous ways. SASA means now in Swahili, it's an urgent problem, so start now.
Kale twalinga tuyombayomba nga tetusobola kubeera nga twekontrolinga.
Okulabirako nti omukyala bwe yabanga ageze oluusi okukola ngaawo naddala eti nga nze ndowooza nti ava mu buyinza nga nkuba.
Naye ensonga ze baaleetanga ezisinga ng'era olaba zeekuusa ku buyinza obusukkiridde, tewalinga ngabana ya buyinza mu maka.
Power is not only the problem but also the solution to preventing violence against women. We are making it personal. Everyone connects with power. Every day, people living with power or grappling with power, they find themselves within this whole conversation.
There was no blaming of anybody in the communities. No one was accusing anybody, but we were generally helping people to think about their power.
SASA is activist-led. It's not workshop heavy based. It comes away from the traditional programming of organizations going to do things themselves. Instead, organizations support activists who do the activities with their neighbors, their friends, and then it continues to diffuse.
N'olwekyo kizibu nnyo ate okuddira omuntu gw'oyagala omugye ku mirimu gye gy'akola ajje ku lulwo. Kyenva nsalawo nze nga nakyewa ntambule ŋŋende gye bali mbatuuseeko meseji zange bazifune nga nze bwe njagala.
Namba 5 wano ndaba nga bali mu kuteesa ku by'okukozesa akapiira kutawa.
Namba 6.
Individuals, local leaders, institutions, the police and the healthcare workers, they are part of this. And if you're working to create norm change, there has to be change at all levels.
Okusookera ddala mu kuŋŋamba nali sikakasa nti binaatuyamba era nali sikikakasirizaako ddala.
Namutuuza ne twogera ne tukikkaanyaako ne tubeera nga tukikola ne tubeera nga mu kukikola ne tubeera nga tuli bulungi bafunamu enkyukakyuka.
Often we've thought that it takes generations or centuries to change, but SASA shows us that preventing violence against women is possible within a relatively short time. It's giving us a systematic way in which to do this work. It is exciting, it is challenging, but working intensely with the communities, we can actually see change happening.
All right, so hopefully that helped give you a little bit of a sense, at least, about what it looks like in communities. So you can see just community, women and men. Oops, that's the video again, sorry. Community, women and men, just going out, talking to neighbors, a lot like, I believe, your approach as well. I'm just going to put the slideshow back on. All right. Let's see. All right, it's not progressing. Let me see. There we go. Okay, so to help you understand a little bit, SASA Together, speakers this morning said how we're mixing and bringing together theory and practice. It's super important to do that. It's not just random ideas we're throwing together. It's really building on what we know about how people change and theory from other fields, other public health learnings, other theories around social change and social movements, to put it together and apply it for violence against women prevention work. This is very important. A lot of folks who don't really understand prevention think, oh, it's just like awareness raising. It really has to go much beyond that if we're really to really help create real change, not just sort of awareness out there. So this is SASA Together really uses a phased in approach. And as I said, when I was talking about the lessons learned from Jijenge, you know, we started with Jijenge saying sort of things like, end violence, or violence against women is hurting women, but people hadn't even come to the idea of understanding what that means, what violence against women is, what intimate partner violence is. And so telling them that it wasn't good really had no impact. And so we use a model, it's a very common model that's been used in a lot of public health programs around the stages of change. But we scaled that up for the community level to think about these 4 different phases of start, awareness, support, and action. So we move systematically through a process of change, supporting community members, leaders, and institutions along this same process. So it is a structured process. Within the but then content, what do we talk about? So a lot of the times within SASA Together, we don't even start with the idea of violence, right? We really focus our work and our engagements around power. What we found is when we published the Mobilizing Communities work, we talked about gender, a women's status, and it didn't really land. It didn't really like hit people. It didn't really stick with them. It felt something like out there. And once we started using the language of power, it really meant that people could connect with it in a whole different way. So violence wasn't something that happened out there by those people. It was something that we were all dealing with. So in the start phase, we really do all the activities around this idea of power within, that we all have power to do something no matter what our circumstances is. And we all have power to make decisions for our own lives. Doesn't necessarily mean community activism at that point. It's just sort of building up this idea that we have our own power within ourselves. Then we move to awareness, where we really talk about men's power over women and how this hurts women, men, communities, families. It hurts everybody. It costs everybody money. It's not good for anybody. And so we really talk about this. It's very sensitive, right? Because there can be a lot of backlash. So you have to frame it very carefully. We never do messaging in SASA together. We always really focus on critical consciousness and really asking questions rather than sort of giving messages and telling people things, but really focusing on the analysis so people understand this idea and can sort of have a new framework and language in their heads about what they're seeing in the community and in their own lives. Then we move to support, because we know that people can't change unless others around them, or it's very hard to change unless others around them are supporting that change. They have ideas for support. They have alternatives to what they've been doing. So if not this, and if not going home and beating my wife when I'm upset, what else do I do? So this idea of support quite broadly, that we have the power with each other to create change, and then action. And action phase is really around the power to. So in my own life, with my neighbors, in my community, we have the power to make change. So those are the phases, and that's the content. And we do that through different strategies. One is local activism, which really is all the community work with community members. They do all sorts of things, from door-to-door discussions. They do community dramas, community events. There's a couples curriculum, poster discussions, and these are community members themselves going and reaching others. Then we also have community leadership, because we know that they're incredibly important in responding, but also setting the tone around violence against women. And then also institutional strengthening, because we know that folks rely on institutions around them, and they also really support or undermine change. So that gives you a little bit of a sense of how we're thinking about facilitating change with SASA together. So lessons learned, we really have to start with ourselves, not just people out there, but ourselves. How are we as the folks doing this work? How are the community members? So when we start with community members, we don't just sort of send folks out there and wish them well and good luck and go talk to people, but intense processes of what this means, what these ideas mean for us in our own lives. And that we have to keep iterating, and we have to really try to understand how to make it more localized for every different community that it's in, adapt it, make it feel, help people make it feel like it's their own. It's not SASA, we don't brand stuff. That's why it's not branded Raising Voices. It's really about communities taking up their own action and doing something. We have to really keenly keep an eye on doing no harm. Of course, we wouldn't want to, but there can be indirect consequences for our work, and we have to be very, very conscious of that. It's a very important ethical element to make a commitment as feminist practitioners to not do harm, and very much have mechanisms in place that help us understand what impact unintended and otherwise that we're having in communities. And really, relationships are it, right? It's like, if we don't have relationships with folks, as folks doing this work, the whole piece of SASA Together is building relationships, helping people connect with each other over something bigger. And so while policies and laws are very, very important, they are really the backstop to the communities who are catalyzing change. So right now, SASA Together is being used in about 28 countries. It's open source, it's online, which we feel is an important contribution in terms of just feminist ethics as well. So there might be more, we don't know. There's many full adaptations going on in various countries and in various languages. Usually during uptake, and I know that STOP is dealing with this as well, we provide technical assistance. in person for a sustained period of time. And we do also have an online course to help staff learn about how to use SASA together. We developed that during COVID because of all the restrictions in travel. But we usually work with organizations over time to help them use the approach. It is now being used in very large scale initiatives countrywide. So for example, the World Bank right now is starting to use SASA in 750 counties in Liberia, for example. So this is very challenging for us because we're very used to working intensely in communities. So it is a new sort of frontier on how to do this work well at scale. It's very resource and people intensive. It does require a lot of care. A lot of donors don't necessarily see the benefit of that. And we're still learning how to do that safely and effectively. So just some considerations as you all are moving forward with your work is, to keep documenting your experiences. It's super important because you forget, right? The community organizing is so intense that you really can forget what you're learning along the way. And you can build in learning, both research and practice-based learning, which is super important all the way along as you go. Don't wait till the end to do sort of an evaluation. Really build it in and then share it. Share the good, share the not so good. It's really important. Not just, we can often learn so much more from what didn't go well than what did go well. So don't be afraid to share it. It's an important piece for ourselves and for the broader field. And then really, think about how diverse you can disseminate your learnings. Don't just keep them. One of the things we used to do is sort of keep the learnings and just feed it back to our own programs. But then we started really publishing much more broadly so that we could share with the broader field of violence prevention. It does require taking creative risks. They can be very scary to do in communities, to publish things as you're doing with the toolbox. It puts yourself out there. So it can be scary, but also is an important part of innovation. And if we're really to move the field forward, this is really required. And yet we can do so and lead with compassion and generosity and care. We have to really stop this idea of competition between organizations and initiatives. It's like, how can we collectively be more generous together, center relationships between ourselves and with people, and really take care of ourselves and others in this process so that it is, a really joyful, fun process, and sharing it with the broader field. Think about how can you connect with organizations in very different places than yours? How can you attend conferences and build relationships with people so that we can all be more networked? And I think, as you guys have been doing, is really also centering fun. What's the point if we're sort of not joyful as we do this work? Violence prevention work can be heavy, but it can also be joyful if we think about how much change and possibility and safety is actually possible in communities and for ourselves. So I will stop there. Thank you very much. I don't know if we have time for questions, but I'll be around, and feel free to write in the chat. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you so much, Laurie, Michelle. We have questions coming in the chat. This is perfect because at the end, we will have a Q&A section. A third of the event in, we have already so much to take away. We are turning to a brief 10 to 15 minute overview of the STOP model delivered by Dr. Sabine Stuyvesant, the mother goddess that I have introduced earlier. And just as a preview of what's to come, after Sabine's input, you will float into breakout rooms, about 4 to 7 people. These are not recorded, where you get to ask questions in smaller groups with project representatives, and we then go in a break. I will remind you, and I give the floor to Sabine now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dani, and thank you so much, Laurie. For me, it could just stop now, and I have tons of questions and just talking to you and all the others here in the room. But the the mother goddess, I like this term kind of, if you keep on repeating it, has 20 minutes in the schedule. And so this is what I reckoned with. And I think we just relax and see what's happening. I try not to speak that fast because all of us are not native speakers, or many of us. And I will share my screen too. And so, okay. Of course, we have a story, and it needs many people to create such a thing. And for me, I was working in a shelter, and the shelter was always full with survivors with their kids. And I always had the feeling there has to be something else. We have to do something where the violence happens. It doesn't happen on an island. There are people around. And can't we do something? Because I always feel it is very unfair that you have not only the violence and the hurt, but also you have to flee. The kids lose kindergarten and school and friends. And in Hamburg and many other cities, you cannot get a new apartment. It's so expensive. And many people, many survivors, they don't want to stay in their flat because they're afraid. And all these things were on my mind when I left the shelter and started to be a community worker in St. Pauli in the mid-90s. And I started a first stop-like project. And the neighbors named it Tarantula, like this big spider. They wanted to have a network, and they wanted to be kind of dangerous and cool. And so that was our name. And then I did a lot of research, and because I wanted a scientific foundation for these ideas, and I wrote my dissertation on that. And in the course of writing the dissertation, I found Amy Thompson from Boston, who had really the same ideas, and she was really having a live model of this work. And so we were sharing our thoughts, and Amy helped us to set up the first pilot in Hamburg, and that was in 2010. And since then, we have 22 projects and counties in Germany and 35 in Austria. And some of you might know that Austria has only a tenth, a little bit more of the population than Germany, but they have a national funding of the stop work. They have it still. We don't know what's going to happen with the new government. And they grew very much. And the founder of Stop Austria was Maria Rösselhumer, and she did a stop training in Hamburg. And after that, she got to work in Austria, and now like Christina and Alicia and others are continuing her work, and Maria is still around. And hi, Maria, you're here. I know that. And so it's very much going on and learning from each other. This is a campaign from close to home I liked a lot. And and so we were inspired, and I thought much has been achieved. Yeah, the women's movement achieved a lot, and we have shelters. The silence was broken. We have legislative changes, and we have training for professional groups. But one thing is, there is a dominance of approaches at the individual level, and after something happened. And the numbers of domestic violence are still high in Germany. They are increasing. And every day in the newspapers, you find these things every day. And there is a new report for the EU, and they found also that the numbers are not decreasing. There's a lot of violence going on against women in Europe, every part of the world. And in Germany last year, 155 in 2023 women were killed by their partners or ex-partners. It's nearly second day a woman is killed by her partner, and every day a partner or ex-partner is trying it. And so it's urgent. We got to do something, right? Yeah, you can take this in. Violence against women, including all who see themselves as women. It takes place in the private sphere, and many survivors or women affected by violence, they do not contact police or the help system, if there is a help system. And so there are big gaps, holes in the support system. And to close this gap, we have to have prevention. We have to do something before the violence happens. And we have to focus the place where it happens and those who are close to survivors and perpetrators, bystanders, family, friends, neighbors. And Amy, this would look familiar. I liked it so much because, as you pointed out, there is a lot of money in the violence sector. Violence, domestic violence, intimate partner violence is costly for service providers and government services. But where a lot of help is really happening and people are really talking, like in the gray space, there is no funding. But there is a huge potential for change. And this is Carol Hagemann White, who inspired me a lot by this, what she said. Of course, violence against women is more about the quality of a community than the quality of a relationship. And so we have to address the community, the local community, or whatever community you're in. STOP is focusing on the local community, very much on the neighborhood. And because people are often turning to informal networks where they disclose, they don't turn to social services in the first place. And therefore, the reactions in those informal networks are crucial. If your neighbor or your friend says, "Oh, never worry, this will pass, it's not so bad," it's different when if she would say, "Oh, well, come in. What can I do? Let's talk." Yeah, there are really, it's crucial. And neighbors, at least in big cities, in big houses, they hear. And even in villages, because I'm a part-time resident of a little village, there's a lot of talking. People know things. The question is, do they really do something? Do they want to know these things? So, and this was an initial point for me, this Chicago study by Christopher Browning, where he found out huge data, much data, that in neighborhoods where the norm of non-intervention was less strong than in others, there were less femicides. Yeah, where people think it's not okay, it's a matter, not a private matter, there are less femicides. And also, he found out that there was more an informal supportive social network, and that had a positive effect in these kind of neighborhoods. And so what we want to do with STOP is making IPV visible, a public matter, and an integral part of community development. It's always left out. Community development is about having kindergartens, schools, and renovate houses. But the home and what's happening within the home is a big part of a community, and whether the community is healthy and happy. And so this is what we want to do. Some people, they really accept the violence, or they're intimidated, they don't know what to do. And so we have to work on that, because sometimes people, they want to help, but they don't know how. Yeah. So our goals. And how to do it? Yeah, there is an answer. Community work or community organizing as a more activist-led approach. And we have these concepts and methods for more than 100 years. So people did it before, and they were very successful. They inspired American presidents, not the recent one, but Barack Obama, and even Hillary Clinton wrote her bachelor thesis about Saul Alinsky and community organizing. And I found this in one of Amy's reports, and I think it's very insightful. This definition of community organizing. This is what STOP is trying to do, make it a matter of the whole community. Yeah. And the thing is, if you're a social worker, this may be not familiar because you have to leave your office. You have to go out. You have to talk to people, actually, do community assessment and mobilize people and local resources. And it's all about collective empowerment through community building, coming together. It's a lot about community ownership, not the institutions, as Laurie says. And we never talk about clients. We only talk about citizens, neighbors, and activists. Yeah, some principles. And Laurie mentioned fun, and the godfather of organizing, Saul Alinsky, said a good tactic is one that your people enjoy. He was also very much into celebration. And our model is that first you should find some resources. You should find an organizer, people who have time and maybe have a training, and you have to have a meeting space. This is the starting point. Then you do community assessment, talk to people and explore the neighborhood and find out who are local leaders. And if local leaders are on your side, then they will help you build the network and help to build and organize. Without them, not much chance. And then our idea is that you bring communities together and build a core group of engaged and educated neighbors. So it's the neighbors that are in the middle. And you really organize a structure. It's not, oh, yeah, we meet next year or next month. No, you have a group that's working on a regular basis, and they create materials, colorful flyers, and theater plays, and take action. And then with this group, the professional organizer, you need one, I would say, establish more cooperation in the community. And also you have to be prepared that there will be individual support needs by survivors. And so you have to have bridges into the help system to services. And then it's like gardening. You have to stabilize and expand your networks. And you have to go beyond the community to get resources and to really change something. You have to make connections to bigger coalitions. And so we think of it as a circle. And this is a process, like gardening, I said. It takes time for things to grow. It takes time for people to change their thinking. And this is where we started in Stalshoop. And they're still on it. We started like 15 years ago. And we started talking to local leaders, and they talked to neighbors, and then we met. And one of the things is, it doesn't have to be depressing. We had a lot of cake while talking about violence. This is possible. And this group, the Stop group, they were like the core. They are two of our activists. They have been living in the neighborhood very, very long. There is a shopping center, and they're reaching out to people, doing a community survey, talking to people. And again, these two women, they know many people. And if they are there with Stop and they ask somebody, hey, I want to talk to you, could you please stop? They stop. They don't dare to not speak to them because they are very kind of famous in the neighborhood. So this is the first step. Making the issue visible, using posters with local people, and then put up the posters everywhere. Just to do that, you need to be many people. And then you start a conversation, because people, they ask back, I saw you on this poster, what is it about? And then people start talking, and they invite them to join the group or to come to an open meeting. Men, it's difficult to involve men in my experience, but it's very, very important. And we had some activists, they are role models, and we address men and all genders as potential allies, not perpetrators. And yeah, this is brave. This was the second phase where our activists, they showed their faces on individual posters. There was more talk in the neighborhood. Some they didn't want to show their faces, so they created these stars with messages. We had trainings and merchandise, and we were with every block party and always in the middle of it. It was not an extra corner. We were in the middle of things going on, mainstreaming in the neighborhood. And I don't know if you're familiar with this, but it's in many countries on the 14th of February, Valentine's Day. It's 1 billion rising, and the ones in the green t-shirts are the Stop Girls, and they practice the dance and they are part of the crowd. And what we always do when we are invited like this is the National Ministry for Family Affairs in Berlin. I don't go alone. I always ask activists to go with me, and this is the participatory idea. And this in the middle is one of our activists, and this is the former German president. And yeah, she was invited. And of course, everybody was asking her, why are you with them, la la la. And so these are things happening. I'm closing very soon. It's really working. We are closing the gap to the services because neighbors help to organize flights to a shelter, and they organize safety change. And we had these support circles during threatening attacks, and it worked. And this is what I think: if communities don't care, if they don't receive the sources and tools needed for taking action, we cannot end intimate partner violence. If they do, yeah, we can. This is one of our activists, and this is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
And we are proceeding with our program of the event. I am very happy that we are now turning to the core of the celebration that we have today. This online event centers around the inauguration of the Stop Toolbox. And I warmly welcome Jördis Spengler for a presentation of this toolbox. Jördis is a researcher and a doctoral candidate. Their primary fields of research and teaching center around survivor-centered approaches towards sexualized violence, gendered violence, and intersectional perspective of social injustice. Jördis has worked on this presentation with Anke Harman and Linda Rames. They are unable to join, but their work you will get to enjoy through Jördis. Professor Dr. Anke Harman is a philosopher, artist, and a design researcher. She's the founder and director of the Center for Design Research at the University of Applied Sciences in Hamburg. For more than 15 years, Harman has been working on artistic and design research, as well as participatory and social design. And Linda Rames is a research assistant at that Center for Design Research in Hamburg and is responsible for the participatory design process for the Stop Toolbox. So what is the Stop Toolbox? Here it is.
Anke, she's a professor for design at my university, my colleague, and she wanted to introduce the idea of the participatory design, because in Anke said this was a conscious decision to use participatory design, and I thought it goes very well along with our participatory community work. And Anke said, yeah, maybe you are wondering what is social design or participatory design, as she said. And she said the aim of this field of design, what developed during the last years very much, is to overcome the classical practice of design as purely visual beautification. Participatory design is about taking seriously the social role and responsibility of design. And it is about taking the social role of aesthetics seriously. because we shape our environment through design, and our understanding and perception is shaped by a designed environment. And the understanding and perception of violence or gender roles or help or neighborhood, of danger or discrimination is also involved in aesthetics. And in social design, participatory design, Anke said, objects of design, such as a toolbox, are taken seriously as spaces of experience. Users are not just consumers, but co-producers. Users do not design in the true sense of the word. This is not their expertise. Their expertise is personal experience. I mean, all of you in the audience, cultural knowledge, regional media habits, and aesthetic expectations. And it is this expertise that is important in the participatory design process. And the design process we had, therefore, aimed to use the participation and together the cultural knowledge, explore aesthetic expectations, research media behavior, and thus democratize the toolbox. Jördis well knows because she had so many interviews with our project partners from the different partner countries and talked to them, and also Linda talked to them about their preferences, and we sat together again and again, and we discussed our illustrations. This was very, but I don't want, maybe Jördis, you will go into that. It wasn't easy, and Anke points out that this process, we talked about different gender roles and expectations, and we negotiated that with the partners because in different countries, these illustration meant something else. And so this was very exciting. And Linda, who cannot be with us, she's an experienced designer, and she was responsible for all these conversations we had again and again, single interviews. And so it was an exciting process. And I stopped now. Anke wrote some more, but I just cut it and hand it over to Jördis, who has been working like hell on the toolbox during the last weeks. So thank you, Jördis.
Thank you, Sabine, and thank you also for bringing in this perspective that it's definitely not my expertise. Hi again, I'm Jördis, and as Dani has said, I worked on this presentation, but actually, of course, I was just part of the team of social work. As Sabine has said, the Toolbox is an interdisciplinary project designed by our 6 project partners that you have already met, and I'm part of the social work team. I was mainly responsible for doing qualitative research to find out what is it that people want to know more about STOP to work on the curriculum. And we also did an extensive desktop research with another colleague of our, Rosa Bracker, who's not here. And also we did the writing of text. But we talked a lot about the toolbox and haven't seen it. So I would like to share my screen and invite you to take a look at it. So I want to explain to you in this presentation very briefly in an overview what it is, what its purpose is, and its functionalities, all of a sort. So you can see here on the welcome screen something Sabine has already talked about, which is the presentation of community and violence. We do not want to portray violence in its act, as this is very disturbing, and also this toolbox is meant to be a community tool. So, but if you take a close look to these illustrations that you will find again and again in the toolbox, you will maybe notice some hints for violence that we also gathered from theoretical frameworks, and that we try to include, as well as the 8 steps of STOP and other community action. The toolbox then enters with 3, well, you could say guiding moments or guiding statements, which is STOP is about change, STOP is community work, and STOP is visionary. To take an overview of what the toolbox is about, you can click here and you will see an overview. By the way, just question, Dani, is my sideline visible or can you see my whole screen? Or is there something blocking the screen?
No, it's okay.
I see you perfectly.
Thank you. So in this overview, you can see the complete contents of the toolbox. You have its main structure and its core, which are the 8 steps that Sabine has talked about before, and our 3 main parts, which are basically a rationale, why is STOP needed, what is STOP, where we discuss the capabilities, foundations, and achievements of the approach, and then, of course, the core, the 8 steps. but also learning from experience and pathways into practice. We do have a lot of material, and we also try to include a lot of partner material to write our text, and also a lot of quotations or interview citations that we have to kind of make this toolbox applicable for a broad target group. So the target groups are, on the one hand, stop trainers and stop trainees, but also students or people who just want to know more about domestic violence. Therefore, it was really important for us to keep a depiction of violence at a minimum level and to make the depictions that we have applicable to everyone. As Sabine has mentioned, this included several rounds of reflections with the partners. So here we have descriptions and explanations of violence and intervention possibilities, where we also discuss a very Europe-centered intervention perspective, especially on the Istanbul Convention. At the end of every chapter, you will find an overview, which will lead you back to the top, so you cannot really get lost in the toolbox, which is one of its main approaches. If we go to the practice part of how to do STOP, you have the 8 steps. And in these 8 steps, you can see this really nice structure that it really is like a toolbox, you see? So the steps are unfolding on top of each other and leading to each other. And we try to visualize that in the toolbox, but also in how the documents and materials that you will find in this toolbox are structured. You have an overview, and then you have different resources that are helpful or provide accessory information to that step. For example, we have knowing your community or one-on-one conversations. And this is actually a gadget of the toolbox that I wanted to talk about as well. You can see here that this part is linked, so it's not accessible to the public. There's an internal area that you can access via login, and then you can get your number credentials. The internal member area is only for people who have provided the STOP or who have absolved the STOP training with Sabine. And if you do not know how to become a member, we also lead to this. For people who already have their codes, which I believe are a lot of here in the audience, they just have to click sign up, and then they can activate their account. Judging from my time is over, so I'm trying to keep it short. And if you have any questions, please ask away. All in all, I just want to say that it was a really nice participatory process, that we try to include a lot of different perspectives on culture, on violence, but also on what is important for each country, but also what can we generalize and stop so it can spread out and fight domestic violence. Thank you.
So I'm welcoming you for the panel discussion featuring the following people. From Austria, from Stop Austria, we have with us Christina Knopf. Chrissy is working at the Autonomous Women's Shelters Association in Austria for almost 5 years. She started in 2020 already as a STOP coordinator for the very first STOP project in Austria in the district Margareten, and this has been mentioned before. And she is now the team leader of STOP Vienna and the coordinator of STOP Austria. We have with us Branislava Marvanova. She comes to us from the ROSA Center for Women, which offers specialized support for women who are victims of domestic violence in the Czech Republic. And the Czech Republic is one of the partner countries here in this project. So is Romania. From Romania, we have Camelia Broca. She is the founder and director of the Association for Liberty and Equality of Gender, ALEC. She is also a member of the European WAVE network with over 20 years of experience in managing specialized support for survivors of gender-based violence and advocacy for violence prevention. From Belgium, we welcome Irene Zeilinger from the Association Garance. Irene is a sociologist and has been working as a feminist self-defense trainer in the primary prevention of gender-based violence for more than 30 years. as Garance's International Affairs Officer, she coordinated the Belgian part for this European STOP project. And last but not least, we have the French partner, Mathilde Sengölge. She's representing CITEL, a French NGO located in Paris, working on the prevention of violence against women and children for over 20 years. Welcome, you all. We were talking about power. I have the power to ask some questions and call on you. And I'll have some questions and I open it up in just a little bit for everybody to participate who is in the room. So, and people have already asked, the first question is, what was the response to the STOP model within your community? We've already heard these are individualized concepts. How do you even make these first steps into your community? Maybe can you identify a big highlight and maybe a barrier also that you have experienced in your work? Chrissy, I start with you because you are in this work for the longest in this round.
Thanks a lot, Dani, and hello, everybody. Good afternoon. I'm very happy to have the opportunity to speak here today on behalf of STOP Austria. The first STOP project was in a kind of small district in the capital city of Vienna, starting in 2019. And now, 6 years later, there are more than 40 STOP projects all over Austria, established in different districts and cities. STOP is implemented in both rural and urban areas, and we can learn from each other here. Certain things don't work in the countryside that are a good strategy in the big city. This rapid Austrian-wide expansion, made possible by funding bodies that have recognized how important violence prevention is in society as a whole, is a major highlight, I would say. With STOP, everyone has to feel addressed and can be addressed. A barrier, I would say, is the little knowledge in society about dynamics of violence. And one other thing, which is not a barrier, it's more like a fact that STOP is ongoing. It never finishes. I mean, so you can never say, okay, now it's enough. We have to keep on going. Yeah.
Wonderful. How about Branislava in this new country? What are your experiences, highlights, barriers?
Hello to everyone. Nice to see you. Nice to hear you. And as for the Czech Republic, we, as a partner, have been new to the STOP concept. So for us, it was really important to learn and to get the training from Sabine and her colleagues. And beside this, we try to implement some steps and try to start a little bit with the program. I would say that the response from the community was overall very positive, but I would say that what we saw was that the main barrier was, I would say, or one of the main barrier was also the reason why this STOP program is so important. And it was a lack of awareness about the topic, and also many myths and prejudices that we can met when we've been talking with people. So I really see the power of prevention in this area. And what was really nice was the support and also energy and enthusiasm from Sabine and all other colleagues. My organization started as a grassroots organization based on the idea women helping women, and it was really grassroots organization, and I could feel the touch of this within the project, really being based in the community, and also kind of shifting or sharing maybe responsibility for protection, because we are service provider, and it was nice to approach also from different angle to see the power of community.
Thank you so much, Branislava. I actually heard Irene talk in the breakout room about involving community. Some amazing ideas how to establish initial contacts. What are your experiences, Irene?
We were very positively surprised by the interest that there was for the STOP approach. Because, you know, when you're organizing something on domestic violence, it's the usual suspects coming to that kind of event. And it's kind of family meetings, you already know the organizations, the people. And this approach was able to also draw people that we haven't seen before, individuals who were interested to become active, but also people from the police, from municipalities, who wanted to understand how they can broaden the approach. Because I guess it's a bit the same in other countries. When you look at public policy on combating domestic violence, it's all about what authorities can do for people and what NGOs can do for people, but there's no space for what people can do for people. And this is the big change in the STOP approach. And we are not only convinced and committed to making STOP work in Belgium, but we are also optimistic that with time we will manage to find the resources. And the major barrier to that is, of course, as always, money. You may know that Belgium is a complicated country institutionally. And the STOP approach sits a bit in between different political competences, and so it might not be that easy to get one minister on board to give the money for starting a long-term STOP project, so that we can show around Belgium that it works.
Thank you so much, Irene. Camelia, how was your situation in community approach? Highlights, barriers.
Thank you, Dani, and I very much resonate with what Brani and Irene have already shared. Romania is also new to STOP, so we had replication workshops during the project. And one of the most often comment that we heard was from people who tried or had experiences of stepping in a domestic violence situation to help the victim and getting rejected. And this ties into one of the biggest fears people have in relation to the STOP model, this myth that the victim doesn't actually want to be helped. This is quite common, and it also gets reinforced, unfortunately, by experiences of police investigations that are dropped when the survivor cancels her complaint. So this is one of the biggest barriers, but STOP comes also with the solution to this, and this is the highlight that I would like to emphasize, that having been in peer-to-peer support communities ourselves, having gone through trainings, we know that the negative reactions are oftentimes related to the mechanisms at work in domestic violence, are connected to the way survivors are approached, are connected to the unrealistic expectations that people have for solving domestic violence. And STOP really addresses these myths and raises actually the power of the communities for local action and for good quality information. As we have seen with the SASA model, this is extremely valuable because the authorities can never reach all the communities, all the neighbors. It's important to have activists in the neighborhoods themselves.
This is a fascinating and important missing puzzle piece and amazing argument also for funding, right? And we will return to the funding issue because it came up a lot. But first, I want to know, we want to go back a step and ask, what inspired you to even be part of this emerging STOP community? What is your driver? Why are you here? Why are you with this project? Maybe this time we start with Brani. I love the abbreviation of the name I just learned.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Well, as I mentioned, my organization is primarily providing services for those women who are already affected by violence. And we are also active in the field of prevention, but we really were looking for some good way how to really step into prevention that would be effective. And one of the things is also that you can hear many times the question, okay, do you think that domestic violence and violence against women is now not so much the private issue? Do you think that it's more like public? It's not silence about it. And I was thinking, okay, but what does it makes public issue? It's not just that you are talking about it, but also that you act somehow, or that the community act. It's not making it public and not private issue means that people are not blind to it when they are not deaf to it when it's happening around them. It's not just to read an article in newspapers or to see some advertisement. It's really somehow have the feeling that I have also some power and some responsibility to add something to our community. And domestic violence is something that affects communities heavily. So this is something that we really wanted to be part of, to solve this and to add besides the support and help that we provide.
That is fascinating. Thank you so much. And some of you might wonder, the French partner Mathilde, she got lost in space for right now, but we tried to bring her back on. So we will weave her in whenever she comes back, just in case you wonder. For right now, though, Camelia, what is your inspiration, your drive to be in this STOP community?
So in Romania, there is little funding overall for the issue of domestic violence, and the emphasis since 2003. That's the year that domestic violence became incriminated in law. The focus has been on support, on action after violence happens. So for me, the most attractive part related to STOP was the prevention promise of this model. And I deeply believe that we need to do more before violence actually happens, to prevent all the costs of violence in our communities. We tried ourselves in Romania a program peer-to-peer. It's called Și eu reușesc, and this involves survivors in helping other women realize when they are in violent situations and find their ways out. And I was very much inspired by Sabine's systematic approach to community building around the topic of prevention and not only offering support.
Thank you, wonderful. What about you, Chrissy? You are in this field since a long time. What is your inspiration? Has it maybe changed over the years?
I guess it stayed quite the same. I'm inspired by the idea that the responsibility is no longer seen to lie with those affected by domestic violence, because everybody has to say something and can also do something. STOP is suitable everywhere, and the prevention of domestic violence can also be the topic of a neighborhood party. The additional focus we put on feminist men work, youth work, and the focus on elder women that have been established in the recent years have been very beneficial and also necessary. We have built up a broad base, and sadly always keep in mind that there can be both victims and perpetrators of violence in your environment. And yes, after 5 years and also starting as a STOP organizer, standing together against domestic violence can also make fun and build friendships. And
that is so wonderful, and that comes through in the materials. No? It can be so fun and build friendships, and there is a lot of celebration and a lot of cake also, as Sabine said before. Last but not least, Irene, what is your inspiration?
Well, I have to go back a little bit more in history. So my organization is specialized in the primary prevention of gender-based violence, which means we are not providing victim support. We are doing what Camilla said, everything we can do so that violence doesn't happen in the first place. And like 10 years ago, I was looking into research on what actually works best in the primary prevention of gender-based violence. And what came up again and again was, for example, SASA. So all those community organizing programs, but they were all in the global south. And I was really jealous. Why does that kind of stuff not exist in the global north? And how would that look like adapted to how communities work in the global north? And then at a WAVE conference, I think it was the Berlin conference, Sabine presented the STOP approach a couple of years ago, and like it was a light bulb going up in my head. And when we were invited to participate in the project, we immediately jumped on the occasion to look into how to make it happen in Belgium. And so my inspiration is this leave your office thing that Sabine was talking about. This going out and meeting people where they are and letting yourself also change by those meetings and encounters, and not thinking that you already know everything that is to know about the topic and what needs to be done and the priorities and the plans, and trust common people that they know what works and that they have, you can work with them so that they have everything they need to act against violence. And in Dutch, there is this expression, mopping up the water while the tap is still open, which is very much this focusing on what should happen once violence has occurred. And for me, STOP is about closing the tap. And that is my inspiration.
This is fantastic. So I'm so happy this is recorded. And I know I'm not supposed to add my own opinion, but I feel so moved because I feel so inspired right now. I'm a sociologist in the United States, right? The response here to domestic violence is incarceration and like Camelia said, criminalization and mandatory arrest laws that has also led to an explosion of female incarceration that are getting caught up. And I see this really with the lens, and Mimi Kim was mentioned, a scholar practitioner I so look up to in the realm of transformative justice, how we are taking back power from state violence exerted through police, for example, that are called in as the big man into these private situations, right? How we as a community can take back justice to a certain degree and co-create new environments that don't need these harsh police responses and carceral responses. I am turning to funding again, to the material side of this inspiration. We have, or maybe it's not funding. The question really is, what support, you that have now been working with the STOP model, what support would you need based on your experience you now have? What is your ask and who are you asking? Let me start with Prani.
Okay. Well, I would say that one important thing that we are still kind of missing is that the prevention of violence against women is a topic for politicians in Czech Republic, that it is priority, because a part of it is then related to financial resources, but it's not everything only about financial resources, even we know that it's very important. But Czech Republic is one of the countries that did not ratify Istanbul Convention, for example. And what we are lacking is really, even that we are talking about that STOP approach is from the bottom going up, but you still need some environment that is not that much resistant towards naming the problem. And so what I would ask would be really, and that's what we need to achieve by even more making it public and even more by activism, and really it's interconnected, because if communities would consider violence against women as an issue, they would also ask the community leaders and the politicians to take care over this. So it's the call from regular people to those who have the structural power to really take the voices of women affected by violence seriously and their needs.
Wonderful. How about you, Irene? What is your call to action?
Ooh la la, how much time do I have? Well, so I completely second what Brani said on the national level. I've been advocating for integrating primary prevention in public policies on combating domestic violence and gender-based violence for 15 years. Now it's in the action plans, but it's still very much an add-on. It's not at all at the center and integrated with secondary and tertiary prevention. So there still needs a lot of work to be done. But I would also like to communicate my asks to the European Union, as this is a European project. I'm also thinking about the presentation we had from Kalina in the first part of the conference, and I don't know if she's still here. but I hope that we can communicate this to her in some other way, because on the one hand, I had the impression that she understood STOP as only being about bystander intervention, but it's much broader than that. For example, Istanbul Convention, STOP completely fits into Article 12, which is the prevention article of the Istanbul Convention. And there are also several prevention articles in the EU directive on violence against women where STOP fits into. And if we are looking at the priorities of the next Daphne call, large-scale actions, that's not STOP, it's community-based, it's on a local level, so that doesn't fit. Victim support, that's not STOP. Prevention depends how they are defining it, and integrated child protection systems, again, that's not STOP. So if the Commission is serious about we've seen what STOP is and that it works and that it's important, then they also need to put their money where their mouth is. And I think this community organizing should also get an important place in the next gender equality strategy. So I will participate in the public consultation and invite everyone else in this conference to also do so, to make our voices heard. But yeah, there is really this reflex of public authorities of always first putting victim support and these institutional responses and forgetting about the power that people have to change the situations.
That's amazing and super, and thank you for reminding us that we can mingle in communication procedures with the powers that be. Camelia, what is your ask, and to whom? What is on your wish list?
So our ask is for leaders, both in public or in private organizations, to trust that people have the power to create change, also in prevention of domestic violence, and to partner with us to have the necessary resources to pilot STOP in several communities in Romania. We are interested in piloting in rural communities and in urban communities to see how we best adapt the model to our own culture and to demonstrate that it works. Prevention in Romanian type of funding so far has been about paying some famous singers for big concerts or some influencers online to convince people to say no to violence. But as we know from our own experience, it takes a lot more than that. It's not only about changing people's words. It's about changing people's attitudes and behaviors. And for this, we need grassroots work every day. It doesn't happen in a big concert with thousands of euro thrown up in the air, but it happens with a commitment for local communities working for change year after year.
Fantastic. Thank you. Applause all around. I see. Chrissy, what is your ask?
Yeah, the cooperation between the Austrian projects and the exchange between us works well, which is one of our great strengths and very supportive, I guess. This is what I wish also for a possible coming stop.eu network, which can make us even stronger. Long-term structures are needed to achieve a sustainable impact, and this is also essential for planning and working in the neighborhoods and with activists. One of the most important things is long-term stable funding. And yes, we all have a responsibility. People and also institutions who are not directly working around gender-based violence, and especially men and male fields who have to take responsibility and make it as a priority. It's not enough to not commit violence, and even if we are a participatory project and voluntary commitment is very important, state resources and fundings are needed for the structure. Yeah.
Fantastic. Irene has her hand up.
Yeah, sorry, I forgot in my list of asks to the European Union is that it's really necessary to recognize feminist NGOs and feminist research and this unique and long-standing expertise that we have. And that we are actually defending democracy and European values. We are the first line defenders for that. And that's all the more important with the rise of authoritarianism, including within the EU. And at this moment, we do not get that from the EU. So.
Perfect. I saw clapping hands in the chat. That's wonderful. I want to bring in, to conclude this program point, I want to bring in a comment that was in the chats by Lori Michau, our keynote speaker, because we had a lot of questions and the issue of funding, right, is raised again and again. And here, for those who have not seen it, Lori says, commitment, political will, and funding resources can be difficult to get from the state. We focus on building allies with key folks in government officials, both at the local and national levels. And Irene brings in the supranational levels as well, particularly those who have influence or decision-making around budgets. We help officials see the benefits of preventing violence. It often comes down to an economic argument, how much it costs the community or the nation to respond to violence, or how much staff time, for example, from the health sector, security, education sector, etc., who are all dealing with violence. An economic argument can be more compelling to government folks rather than a human rights one. It does take time and real mapping of who is who and who is more likely to be an ally. Important point, I'm sure you can also find in the toolkit. The time has come. The floor is open for your questions. Irene has already shown you how to do that. You can raise your hand. You can put your question in the chat. You can put your name in the chat if you want to speak. All kinds of ways to interact here and share your questions. And while you are thinking, because I'm that kind of person that cannot really deal with silence, while you are thinking, and please chat away, I had a couple questions up front collected to the role of men specifically in stop violence prevention. We saw men throughout the video clips and in the photographs, but participants here in the event were wondering, are you really working with men's organizations specifically? Are you targeting male persons in a specific way, or how do you work around this?
Let me just very quickly jump in and say that I
Yes.
think because this is our Q&A for the end of the event, so we can also open to other speakers that came before the panelists. So Sabine or anyone else who spoke before, if you want to jump in and contribute, please do.
So it's about men. Krisi, do you want to go ahead? Or Irene, did you just start to say something about it? I don't know. No.
Yeah, I mean, I can start. In Austria, I think 2 or 3 years ago, we started to also put the focus on stop feminist men work, and also started to organize regular meetings for male people. And yeah, it's yeah, some are a little bit more difficult to get them addressed and to that they feel responsible to do something against domestic violence. But we started with, which you can also find on the Stop Toolbox, for example, bigger sporty events like the Feminist Men Run, where we got in touch with a lot of male people, and then we tried to invite them and to mobilize to come to our frequent meetings. So this was one of the ways to get to know more to men. Yeah.
Maybe Laurie, you can say something, because there were really many men in your video, and so are there special approaches, or is it, what do you do?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. We talked about this a little bit in our small breakout group. I think a few things. One is we make sure that what we call community activists, so those people closest to us actually going and doing the organizing, are always half men and half women. We're really conscious of that. So we make sure to bring men into that process. The second thing is we don't necessarily start with the language of violence. So if we put out the word to say, oh, we're interested in working on violence against women, no men will show up. And so we talk more about communities, supporting relationships, improving relationships, strengthening families. Like, we're really conscious about the language that we use. The third thing is we never use the language of like blame and shame. We never use the language of perpetrators. We really talk about the benefits of nonviolence rather than sort of calling out all the negative consequences of violence. We know that that doesn't really support positive change and really just makes men defensive. So we don't do that. And we also go, so the fourth thing I think is we go to where men are. So we really find them where they are. So you saw in the video, that was like a little mechanic shop. We'll go to taxi stands where there's men hanging around all day, to drinking joints, to, all sorts of places in the community. And we do that through community mapping, finding out where men are. And, each of the community activists that we work with, both men and women of all ages and abilities and all sorts of things, they try to reach out to their own communities. So it's like it's like how to drop the pebble and the ripples sort of spread. It's really trying to help people not necessarily go to random folks that they might not know, but actually men in their own social and professional circles. I hope that helps. Thanks.
Great. Anybody want to add something? There is also a question if we are on special populations, basically within the broader field. There's one question up front. How do you address violence against girls? Does the model account for age?
So it's different and depending on resources. So in Steilshoop, our pilot, we did a lot of youth work too, because one of the main coalition partners was the head of a local youth center. But normally we address more adults, because we think, like one kid in Amy's project told to me, Ms. Stuyvesant, it's about the parents. They have to stop fighting. They have to change, because we learn from them. And but Austria, and they have special youth programs also. Maybe Krisi, you can talk about that.
Yeah, I also wanted to say that we have a youth worker in our Vienna team, and also before we have, I wanted to also say that we have 3 male stop organizers, which is important if you want to do feminist men work. And yeah, in the youth work, we give workshops about red flags, warning signals, and also how to, what is a healthy relationship. So this is maybe more easy to also address girls. Yeah.
You're working with schools.
Yeah, with schools and also with like different activities, painting or graffitis, and yeah. So.
TikTok.
TikTok, yeah.
Irene has her. Yes, Irene, you have some.
In Belgium, there has been quite a lot of research on what we are calling violence in romantic relationships of young people, where the data is really shocking. It's more than 70% of romantic relationships have controlling behavior, violence, etc. And so it's quite a high up priority on the political agenda in the French-speaking part of Belgium to not forget about young people and minors when it's about preventing domestic violence. And for us, it's logical that it would be all types of domestic violence in our stop approach, no matter the age. And the sooner you start with prevention, the better it is.
Great, wonderful. Do we have more comments? Again, to the audience out there, the floor is open to you. I have more questions, but there is really space for you. Also, I see some of the people have to leave. That is natural. Please do not go without filling out the evaluation form that has been posted in the chat by Dore. It's only taking a couple of minutes and can also help, right, to get more funding for the next round and more dissemination. So please be part of this community. Lori posted in the chat a question I have is, how are all of you now working to share the learnings with the broader violence against women prevention field? There is so many good practices to learn from and share. So where do you all go from here? Whoever wants to jump in.
I don't know. I guess Laurie is the one who's connected the most to global discussions, but within this project, we have WWP as a European network. So, and we did a webinar together with WWP, and there were people from all around the world, not only Europe. And I guess we're going on to present STOP on different conferences, and maybe with your help and others, we can have a next wave. Like, you know, I have the feeling there should be something more, or have a new energy to promote this kind of community work. And yeah, I'm still, because we don't have national funding in Germany, and it's a struggle from day to day. Although this is a rich country, we don't have much resources for the STOP work, and we don't have a national coordination, nothing like in Austria yet. Still they have, and so we're struggling on this space, and we try to have network meetings between Austria and Germany, and I hope that we will have more European, you know, European situation. But I don't know, maybe you have some suggestions yourself. So because I feel somehow now we are expanding and spreading the world, but we don't have resources. If there are questions and people want something, we are like, oh, please read the toolbox. And we are hoping to get some funding for a conference, for a next webinar, for a next European or maybe international training. And maybe you could be one of our trainers if we do a webinar on STOP. Yes, I'm thinking about these things, but they're not finished. Yeah. Camelia, excuse me.
I only wanted to mention also the important role of WAVE in this project, but also in spreading good practices beyond the EU countries. WAVE is active in so many other countries in Europe and around Europe, also in connection with networks in other parts of the world. And I myself use different groups that I am part of. An example is the CEO circle of the grantees of Global Fund for Children. this organization is really valuing community approaches, and we just had we have regular meetings every month, grantees from 5 different continents. There was a theme of community approaches, and I used the opportunity to talk about STOP, and I really hope that this will grow wings, and we can find more systematic approaches to build also more funding streams towards community work.
Margie says an international conference would be helpful, so maybe some funding for that. And you have mentioned that I'm thinking global, and Laurie might know more about this. This needs to be shared at the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women in a side event. And maybe there is some resources and support to be garnered. I mean, I am on fire. I want to do this in Akron, Ohio now. And I will be in touch, and I will be registering on the Toolbox website. We are moving to a close here, unfortunately, but you know that there is a recording that you will get in a follow-up email by Dure. And that's also how you can engage and stay in touch. You have already noticed that we have celebrities and high-level representatives here in the room. And we are concluding this event with yet another bang, because we are welcoming Dr. Carol Hagemann-White in the room, who together with Simon Gunther, you have learned, was on the advisory board of this project. Carol Hagemann-White is Professor Emerita of Gender Studies and Educational Theory at the University of Osnabrück and has published widely on issues of gender equality and gender theory. She has directed many huge policy-related empirical studies on gender-based violence since the late 70s and has been a consultant to the Istanbul Convention. She has most recently mapped intervention practice on violence against women and against children in 4 countries. And I'm asking Dr. Hagemann-White, why does community matter?
Thank you for the introduction. I hope you all have patience for another 5 minutes. We have today a project with a groundbreaking strategy for preventing domestic violence has introduced us to a systematic method with tried and tested tools. The project has 2 names. One is originally a German acronym, STOP, with a message: we need to stop the violence, not avoid it, not escape it, not recover from it, but stop the violence. And after now 60 years of raising awareness and practicing intervention and support, it is time to find effective ways to stop it. The second name is Community Matters. And this says, on the one hand, that violence in the home, the family, or in close relationships of all kinds is not a private matter, but a concern for the community, and calls for action. But it also says community matters. It's important to the quality of life for all of us. It is not marginal. The community is not something we can care for or just leave it be, but it, in the current state of affairs in public life, from political trends to the so-called social media, attending to real-life community may be more crucial than many now realize. Looking back, in the 1970s, the feminist movement named men's violence against women and began enabling women to escape it and to rebuild their lives. 20 years later, and just roughly speaking, with networks of shelters and follow-up, the feminists working against gender-based violence demanded that not just women, but the entire community, the society as a whole, must take responsibility for ending this violence. Thus, in the 1990s, a community response to gender violence became an important theme, and it centered on building cooperation among agencies, professions, and services involving police, social welfare institutions and services, housing provision, professionals, health professionals and services, education. These networks created a methodology called the chain of intervention, meaning that any professional or practitioner who becomes aware of gender-based violence or think that it's a possibility should be willing to, be knowledgeable about basics and should be willing and able to either offer help or support or refer a woman to competent agencies that can do so. Cooperation among the professions increased awareness and the development of good practice. Yet limitations have also become visible. And what I became aware of and learned today from this marvelous inspirational talk from Lori is that beginning from the power of agencies and their institutional power, it's perhaps not the right way to go about it. Beginning from an analysis of power, who has power? What power do the individuals who experience violence, the neighbors, the community members, do they have or could they have, and what can that be developed? And that is, I think, something we have to think about. We saw this morning at the beginning that the European Union, referring to the Council of Europe Convention, basically said anyone who becomes aware of domestic violence or gender-based violence should report it to the authorities. That leaves us, though, with a focus entirely on the power of authorities. And I think that is the point where we are with this community approach, with community organizing and neighborhoods and starting from the grassroots. We're developing an approach to come away from that and start with the people and not with the institutional powers. They have their uses, of course. The police should do their job and so on, but it doesn't really solve the problem. Prevention of intimate partner violence can be more effective if it starts in the social environment where conflicts arise and may escalate into violence. And community organization begins at the grassroots in everyday life and seeks to unlock the potential of informal networks and neighborhoods for helpful responses. They can open doors to connect women and men who are or could be involved in violence to services and institutions that can help them find the intervention that fits their needs, as opposed to having a standard intervention. This is what you do if you find out about it. And of course, institutions like having standards. If the police are called, this is what they should do. It's more complicated than that. For both the community and activists and the women and men facing potential or very acute violence, being helped to find the resources that could support them or fit their needs could be an empowering experience of being able to make changes. And that, of course, mobilizes the quality of life in the community as well. You've heard today about all that the STOP project has done in the 6 countries that are involved with developing, evaluating, training, and building a toolbox that clarifies, instructs, and shows how to build a community-based project step by step. The challenge is to adapt models and promising practices to the socio-cultural, institutional, and local, and perhaps tradition-bound surroundings and conditions to connect overarching ideas and goals with the concrete ways people talk, think, feel, and are able to act. Sally Mary concludes a very brilliant global study of different kinds of intervention against violence against women by saying that in a world that seems increasingly polarized and divided, the challenge is, she calls the challenges localizing or translating human rights into the vernacular, into something that people not beginning with as we heard this morning from Laurie, not beginning with a rights discourse that immediately sets up the possibility of saying, wait a minute, I have rights too. And then we can fight about who has more rights. But that human rights have to make sense in terms of what everyday action and forms of living and feeling and thinking make it seem important and reasonable and can translate it into praxis. And in a world that seems increasingly polarized and divided, this approach may be one of the most important strategies that lead away from violence. And I wish you all inspiring time developing these ideas and all that you have heard today into your own practical possibilities and communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Carol Hagemann-White. Before I officially close us out for today, I would like to ask Sabine Stövesand, aka the Mother Goddess, for her closing remarks.
You don't want to say something on top, do you?
Carol is the Mother Goddess, or Laurie, or whatever. We are all in different ways. Now, my heartfelt thanks to Carol, who has been an important inspiration for decades now. And when I spoke to Aisha 30 years ago in the shelter, I could never have imagined that this conversation would be the beginning of something we call now Stop, mobilizing already thousands of people in Austria and Germany. And I would really like to thank my international partners, Laurie, Amy, Christy, and Mimi, very much for the years of encouragement and dialogue. And I thank my great partners in the EU project who have been so open to this new way of working. And I hope the spark will fly. And because for me, top work is hope in the view of political and social developments we face now. It is something that kind of, how would you say, grounds me and helps me not to go crazy in the face of all the rollback that equality, gender equality, and democracy are currently experiencing. And misogyny and the denial of self-determination over one's own body and life is something that has always been around in the world, but now it's getting increasingly strong in the West at least. And I recently read something by Herbert Kickl, the next Chancellor of Austria, and he said, "You women organize the household, do the shopping, bring up raise the children, and support your men." And this image of women, which has always included direct and indirect violence, obviously is not a thing of the past. And Stop, for me, and I see it in the neighborhoods where we are working, and Laurie could prove this with their studies, is not only about preventing intimate partner violence, it's about gender equality. And it doesn't stop there. It's about democracy and social justice in general. And that means coalition building with groups that are not only into gender-based violence, groups that are targeted more and more like migrants and refugees. I think this is very important. And I firmly, as Carol said, I underpin this, I firmly believe that we need to do grassroots works. In these times, we need to talk to people directly, not patronizing, not accepting everything they say, but interested and open. And that is hard sometimes, but I think there's no way around doing change work from bottom up. And we are not about making abstract demands. We are about setting an example in the everyday life of people. And and Laurie and Raising Voices have shown that community work can thrive under difficult conditions in traditional societies and villages. And I think then we can do it too in Bavarian villages or wherever. And I see that. And one practical thing could be a next European conference or training. We need funding for that. And maybe we will meet again in such a context. And please don't let the patriarchal and anti-democratic backlash bring you down. Let's get together. We are many. We have the playlist. We can dance and we can do stuff. Thank you.
Amen. Fantastic. I have nothing to add. Thank you so much, Sabine. who already thanked all the project partners, also the funders, European Commission. I'm thanking again Ola, Hamadi, and Dure Smirsa. You will get a follow-up email from them. Please evaluate this event. Please connect with the STOP teams in Europe. You will find further informations in the follow-up email. Please all have an inspired evening or afternoon. And yes, let's build safe communities together. Thank you very much.